Just have a special announcement for my listeners. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for listening. Started off as an experiment in August, but I've had about 2,000 listens of my podcasts, and I'm so grateful. I have a special request for my year-end episode 2020, which has been an incredibly interesting year. I plan to do an episode of listener feedback. So what I'd love for you to do is leave me a message, and the link is in the show note, about what you took away. What was one thing after listening to several episodes was the most impactful to you, that helped you in some way, or was an insight you hadn't thought about before? If you can do that, then I will be sharing some of those insights. You can see that link in show notes. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. When I went to my boss to quit my job in 1998, I was so anxious. The job I was leaving was considered by many as the best job in the company, and I didn't want to let him down. I finally got a chance to debrief with him 22 years later in this conversation. Cosimo, Porta, got his start just as I did, pumping gas at a Mohawk gas station. After we parted ways from the head office of that company in the late 90s, he went on to start a career at a fledgling company you may have heard of, Starbucks. When he left a few years ago, after 18 years, he was running their entire U.S. retail operation as executive vice president. In this conversation, we catch up on what we have each learned from our earlier years in the gas business and what we went on to learn, including leadership lessons from Starbucks founder Howard Schultz. Hi there.
Hi, Shaquille. How are you?
Good. How are you, Cos?
I'm doing great.
Great.
Yeah, it's good to hear your voice.
Yours too. Takes me back.
Yeah. You sound the same.
You too. Thanks for doing this and making the time. I really appreciate how quick you responded.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
You're living in Vancouver now?
We are. Yeah, we're living in Vancouver. We've been here now for the last 4 years.
Wow.
We moved back from Seattle. We were in Seattle for almost 12 years.
Wow.
And now we're back here in Canada. It's been great.
What I'm doing is the theme of this whole episode I'm doing is actually quite selfish in that I'm just catching up with people that have been influential in my life and career and having a conversation and seeing where it goes, what insights we can draw from your experiences to share with others as they're navigating this challenging time.
And how long has it been since you and I worked together, Shaq?
Well, yeah, I left Mohawk in 1998. In 1998.
So you're here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You left. Oh, you left just after I did.
Yeah, that's right.
Gosh, because I remember how nervous I was the day I asked you to go for lunch so I could tell you that I was going to do my MBA.
Well, you know what? It was at that meeting where I didn't have the heart to tell you that I was also going to be moving on.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It was at that meeting where I realized, I shouldn't tell Shaquille right now that, I too am planning to move on. Although Mohawk was a fantastic organization to work for. And after 11 years, it was time to move on. But I remember how I was thinking to myself as a leader, what did I do wrong that Shaq feels the need to go get his MBA? And because you were so great to work with, your career was definitely moving forward. But I was very happy for you.
Yeah.
In the sense that you were moving on to something you really wanted to do.
Well, it was an interesting time because we were just in the midst of having been acquired, right? They called it a merger, but it was an acquisition of from Husky.
That's right. I think a lot of people at that point had to really make some tough career decisions. Do you stay or after so many years that you've been there, or do you move on? my decision was definitely to move on.
Yeah. I kind of sense. I mean, I knew afterwards that you were leaving, but I did not know at that moment of that conversation at lunch, where I was so nervous to tell you that you already made that call yourself. Hey, Cos, I'd love to go back. I don't know if I ever told you this, but my first knowledge of you as a human being goes way further back, because a high school friend of mine, Paula, worked for you at Middlegate Mohawk.
Oh, wow.
And that was so.
Wow.
I would have been 15 maybe at that time. Does that sound timeline wise like around 1986, 7?
86. Yeah, wow. 87. Yeah. So, wow, you're kidding.
Yeah, that was when I first became aware of you. And I mean, because the name stands out, right? You don't know a lot of people named Cosimo or Cos. So I remember that. And Paula always had nice things to say for you. And I didn't do anything with that. It was just parked in the back of my mind. And then years later, I'm working for my dad at his gas station. And you walk in and become his district manager.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you.
So interesting.
I'll tell you that was interesting for me, because at that time I was in university getting my business degree, and in that moment, like, it all snapped together for me that here's this guy that a few years ago was working at a gas station. I'm working at a gas station, and now he's kind of a district manager at this oil company servicing my dad. So it was very interesting in that split second when you walked in to that gas station the first time, I kind of did some immediate career planning. That could be me one day.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because that Middlegate Mohawk was significant for me because, after university, I was flat broke and, just trying to, quite frankly, just trying to make some money and make a name for myself.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got a job at Mohawk, I was just pumping gas, but at Middlegate, they promoted me to a manager, and I actually got a salary. And I remember thinking, I have made it because I know exactly how much money is going to be coming in every month. My rent's going to be taken care of. And that was a real pivotal moment for me in my career journey. But I always knew that I wanted more and I wanted to be a district manager. I didn't realize it was going to happen that fast.
Yeah.
But it did. And your dad was one of my favorite dealers, first shift.
Well, one of these days I'm going to actually interview him on one of these podcasts because he's got some interesting stories to tell. But I mean, that's interesting that the milestone that you remember was that day you were put on salary, and that was your feeling that you'd made it. You were what, 20 something?
Yeah, 20. I was probably 23.
Yeah.
The reality is you get out of school back then and the economy was still a little hard.
Yeah.
And I had 3 different jobs and you were making money, but you never had the security of a job. And then Mohawk was my first, what I would call, stepping stone into developing somewhat of a career.
Yeah.
I wanted to learn right on the ground how to run a business, and then that led to managing stores for a year and a half, and then that led to being a district manager. And then it kind of just took off from there.
Yeah,
but it started there, pumping gas.
Yeah, well, for my listeners, just to kind of let the cat out of the bag for a bit, is that you started pumping gas at a Mohawk gas station, and before you left Starbucks, you were basically running the U.S. business.
Yeah, I was. For my last 3 years at Starbucks, I was the executive vice president for all the stores, which was an incredible experience. And Starbucks was incredible because I had Canadian experience, I had U.S. experience, and I had international experience. And it was just a real joy. But, I go back to my journey, starting out in a gas station.
Yeah.
Pumping gas, managing people, leading people, and learning so much from that experience that it really allowed me to continue on in retail operations.
Yeah, me too. I have in my head so many interactions and stories from experience at the gas station that kind of came back to me later in life.
Anything like that for you? Anything specific that kind of came back to you later in life? Anything you remember from?
From the guys, I think that the way you treat people, the way you treat employees, regardless if they're making minimum wage or if they're high salaried employees, really is going to define you as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I learned. I mean, listen, when I was managing a gas station, some of those, employees, they're making minimum wage and they don't necessarily need to show up.
Right.
And they're going to show up if you create a great work environment for them. And I think that stayed with me because if you can create a great work environment for those folks, you got to remember to do that at every single level that you're operating at.
Yeah.
And I tried to focus on that in my career for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll talk in a bit about my experience of that, having worked for you later on in my career. But, one of the things I noticed when you were my dad's district manager, I was like eager, right? Like I was in university thinking about my future, and I noticed, I took notes, mental notes, that every time you walked in, you came in with a certain bounce and an energy. And I'm just curious, was that as you're sitting in your car, getting ready to come in to visit us, was that a conscious switch you turned on, or were you always like that, like all the time?
Well, I can't say that I was like that all the time, but I will tell you that I always felt it was important to show up in a positive mood.
Yeah.
And to leave, in a positive mood.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, sometimes the toughest part about being a leader is you got to be on all the time, and you got to be authentic about it.
Yeah.
But I always felt that if I could give energy, I was going to get energy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. You show up with energy, you get energy. If you show up with no energy, you're going to get no energy back.
So true.
And,
one of my favorite pieces of advice I got from somebody, I can't remember who it was. I think he said something like, be responsible for the energy you bring into a room. Own it. Right? Mm-hmm. Recognize you are responsible for the energy in the room when you're there. And that's stuck.
Yeah. So I find that at home. My mood sometimes can determine the mood of the family.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're leaders at work. We're leaders at home. And I think your mood really is critical. Your energy is critical.
Yeah.
And hopefully that becomes natural because you just like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You like your work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, definitely
you have to work at it.
Yeah, you do have to work at it. I have lots of great memories. Like I have vivid pictures in my mind of sitting in your office when I was being interviewed. And one specific thing that stands out, there's a few specific things, but one that stands out for me, I remember, there's all sorts of times, like we managed retail locations and we had dealer operators and franchisees running those locations. And there were times when some of these individuals, these dealers, would try to pull the wool over our eyes. And I remember that I was new, right? I was a new district manager. I operated from a premise of trust. I didn't think anybody tried to fool us or whatever. And I noticed a couple of times you really helped me out by catching some of my operators on something. And So I remember at one time that you wouldn't let things go. Like you would talk to some operators like with tremendous generosity and support and empathy. And then you'd be able to swing to the other side and talk to somebody else with candor, directness, and skepticism. I observed that. What was your experience of it?
Well, you know what? And it's a good observation because in that industry back then, anyways, we did have to deal with a lot of discrepancies and potentially some dealers falling off the rail and doing their own thing. And but here's the thing. The energy came. I always say if you have 10 dealers, 8, maybe 9 out of 10 of them are going to be great. Yeah. They're going to give you energy. And then the one that's not, you have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And you have to be open and honest
Yeah.
You can't just, beat around the bush. You got to be very open and honest with your concerns.
Yeah.
And you got to potentially make a change.
Yeah.
We, you know that, Shaquille. We had to make a few changes.
Yeah.
But the reality is most of them are going to be great.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps you going.
Yeah. I think you're right. In fact, I called on that memory when years later I was a director of marketing at another company, and we had one person on the team that was on the side was a real estate agent. And it kind of came to light. They were doing deals during business hours and faxing sale and purchase agreements. And it had gone on for a little while. And then I finally realized that the damage it was doing to the rest of the team, you could not ignore it anymore. And so we just dealt with it. And I was really worried because it was my first time letting somebody go in a corporate environment. And I was really quite anxious about it. And what would it do to the team? And what would it do to the morale? That was the first time I realized that when you actually cut somebody away like that, you actually see the morale of the team come up.
Right.
Because you send a message to the rest of the team that, look, you value their work so much. It just wasn't fair that this person was not giving value to the organization. So I learned that lesson too, but I remembered you then.
Yeah, and Shaquille, what's interesting is that most leaders will tell you that when they have to let people go, of course, it's the hardest thing because we're human beings, right?
Yeah.
However, most would tell you they waited too long.
Yeah.
And they create and there was too much damage created. And the minute the person's gone, the team starts to just elevate and starts to perform beyond what you thought possible. And it's critical that you don't wait too long and create damage with your great team members.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. And it's right, you're right. Every time I let somebody go, I always realized afterwards, I agonized way too much. That should have been done sooner.
Yeah.
For the sake of the company, but also for the sake of the individual. Because obviously they weren't in the right place. They needed to do something else.
Right. Right. And you're sending them to potentially a different journey that they're going to be more of a fit for.
Yeah.
And it usually works out really well in the end for everybody.
Yeah. So you left, when you left Mohawk that day at lunch where you were already planning on leaving, did you already line up something with Starbucks? Did you already know that's where you were going?
I had, because, back then Mohawk got bought out. Everybody knew it. I had certain industries approach me, companies like Coca-Cola, A&W, Starbucks. And I chose Coca-Cola because it was a global brand. And I thought, wow, this is, Coke.
Yeah.
And I worked there for 6 months.
Okay.
And I absolutely was not a fit to the culture or the values of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I got lucky because while I was there, I had Starbucks and A&W phoning me back to wanting me to reconsider their offer.
Huh.
And I chose Starbucks. And I can't tell you how many people thought I was making a big mistake because they said, you're leaving a global brand to go work for a coffee company. And back then, Starbucks only had 800 stores.
Right.
We weren't even national across North America at all. So I had mentors telling me I was making a big mistake for my resume. I was making a big mistake for my career. But I knew in my heart that I was going to be a fit at Starbucks.
Yeah.
I knew in my heart that I loved their product, their values. I just knew that I could excel in that environment. And you know what? It only took my first day there to realize this was going to be my home for a while.
It's so funny. I could have probably told you that before because every time there was an opportunity to have a meeting with you off site, you and I went. You took me to Starbucks.
That's right.
I knew you loved Starbucks. You had one in your neighborhood.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I was a big customer. And I thought, if I could wait in line every morning to get my coffee, I could probably get a job with these guys.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was absolutely fantastic.
Like 18 years?
I can't ask for
18
more.
years?
Just over 18 years. And
wow.
I started in Vancouver, the director, and then I went to the U.S., oversaw half the U.S. at the beginning, and then all of the U.S. in my last 3 years. But the international market was fascinating too. I had 55 different countries.
Wow.
Where I oversaw the retail operations. And it was absolutely fascinating to learn how to deal with different cultures and laws and values. And it was fascinating.
It must have been so complicated.
It was great. Very complicated. I mean, you have to be very situational when dealing with any country. I mean, not one country was the same. And, Asia was different than Europe, and Europe was different than, Latin America, and Latin America was different than, and it was just the biggest learning I've ever had as a leader was probably taking on the international market. I needed to slow down.
Yeah.
And just, seek to understand and listen a lot more.
Yeah.
For sure.
I remember reading something about Starbucks in Asia. Was it something about the way they recruited people? It was like really modern. And is that something that sounds familiar to you?
Asia is so ahead in terms of technology, Shaq. I mean, the way we were recruiting was really done online, and it was, we had systems that would, go through resumes and just take out a lot of the grunt work. And I think it helped us make some really, really good people selections. And they were just so much further ahead from a technology perspective that it was just fascinating for me to actually be working in Asia, then bringing back things to North America that were working there.
Wow.
But it was fascinating.
Was the store culture very different? Like if you were to take a store, let's say in Vancouver, in Kerrisdale, versus a store in, let's say, Japan, would there be a big difference in the store culture?
I would say the store cultures were very similar, if not identical, because people were connected to the company's values and mission. I would say what was significantly different were the business units, right? So the office in Japan was significantly different than the office in Canada versus the office in the US, and you're dealing with just different cultures. And what could be a compliment to one culture could be an insult to another.
Right.
And you really needed to understand the different cultures in order to be effective as a leader, for sure. And one of the, for example, Asia, it was all about the relationship first, the business was second. If you didn't build that relationship, you really had a hard time. So you had to invest in that. But it was more the cultures within inside the businesses. But the store's cultures were very similar wherever you went.
That's amazing.
Like
that boggles my mind. And that how do you run an organization, a global organization with such different kind of country cultures and customs and norms, but at the operational level of the store, you maintain the same culture? That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think when you have a mission that doesn't change. For Starbucks, it was nurturing the human spirit, one cup of coffee at a time. When you have values of a company that, that did not change and that people were following, it got a little bit easier. I think as you went up the chain of leaders, that's where you really needed to understand situationally. If you were in China, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, France, Germany, every one of those is slightly different in terms of how you would lead your teams. But everything was connected to the mission and values of the company. And that's what made it consistent, I think, in the stores.
Wow. Of course, you look at Starbucks, me as a consumer, it's one of those companies that everybody studies and tries to emulate and hires. And to think that it just started from, a single location in Seattle, and it became this global brand that is a beacon for culture and customer experience and innovation, and to have worked there. I want to ask you two questions. The second one might be uncomfortable with C, but the first one I want to ask you is leadership lessons from Howard Schultz. You obviously worked for him. What is something that you took away working from him that you'll carry on and you'll share with other people?
The biggest lesson I learned from Howard Schultz was in 2008 and 9, when the financial crisis hit in the U.S. and the economies were falling off a cliff, and Starbucks was almost falling with it, and people were losing their homes and people were losing their jobs, and it was a very, very tough time. I would say the biggest lesson that I learned from him when he came back as CEO was when you're going through challenging times, to accept the brutal reality of what's in front of you. Mm-hmm. It becomes too easy to go into denial, especially if you've had a long run of success. Mm-hmm. It becomes too easy for you and your teams to be in denial and just to think your problems are going to go away, mm-hmm. and you're going to wake up the next day and it's going to be like it was. Mm-hmm. He really put the brakes on the company and really asked us to accept the brutal reality of what was in front of us and be prepared to really climb a hard hill. And, even for myself, I was in a bit of denial in terms of, we had to shut down 600 stores.
Yeah.
And I think that with him coming back and just getting us to truly look at what's in front of us, the faster we accepted the brutal reality, the faster we got our teams focused on the right work, the faster our results came back.
Yeah.
But without that, a lot of people, you go as a leader, it's so easy to go into denial and just think everything's going to be fine. Yeah. And you could be leading your teams off a cliff.
Yeah.
Realistically. So I think that was the biggest learning for me.
It's so relevant right now. I mean, the whole world needs to be looking at that and saying, let's face the fact, let's face the reality.
Oh, yeah. It's very relevant now. I mean, what's happening right now is very comparable, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Very comparable.
A great lesson. That's a really, really important, powerful lesson. I came across that lesson recently. I'm a big Jim Collins fan. Like, I really love his book, Good to Great. I incorporated a lot of what I do.
Oh, it's my favorite.
He talked about that exact thing, the Stockdale paradox. Face the brutal facts and then move on. But actually seek brutal facts. Look for them.
Right.
Get them all on the table and then move on.
That's right. That's right. And Shaquille, you bring up what's going on today. I mean, if you think about today with industries like airlines, hotels, food and beverage, oil and gas, I mean, all brick and mortar, they're going through some very challenging times.
Yeah.
And it's going to require something different for sure.
Yeah. So my second question, that was great. Thank you for sharing that so clearly. My second question is, of the people that worked for you, what do you think they'd say about the biggest thing they took away working for you?
I hope they would say. I hope they would say that as a leader, it is imperative to focus on the development of your people, mm-hmm. and constantly be focused on upgrading your talent. Mm-hmm. Because, business is not constant. It's not consistent. Things change and you need your teams to grow with it. Mm-hmm. And you need to bring people on that are going to strengthen your team. I would hope that's what they got out of my working time together. I will tell you the thing I'm proudest the most in leaving Starbucks, it's not my sales numbers because I can't even remember them. Mm-hmm. It was the amount of people that were promoted under my leadership and got opportunities to do, bigger jobs, better jobs, mm-hmm. and got an opportunity to stretch themselves. So I would hope that's what they would get out of it.
Well, that's great. That's really great. Yeah. I that time at Mohawk was such a special time because in some ways I felt like we were a bunch of kids getting to run the show. And it was like, I was probably the youngest district manager. I was 26 at the time, maybe 25. You must have been in your early 30s.
And we were kids.
Right? The part of the organization that ran the retail business that was it. Like that was the ultimate career step you could take in the organization. And there's a few people older than us, but for the most part, it was a bunch of 20 to 30 somethings running that business, and we had so much opportunity to learn and grow. We were trusted. It was a real highlight in my career that few years.
Oh, Shaquille, spending 11 years at Mohawk was the best experience for me right out of university because of what you just said. It was a learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a lot of people, right? So it was up to you to do and get things done.
Yeah.
And you might not even have had the skills at times to do it.
Right.
But you did it. You figured it out. And it was just a learning environment. It was like getting my MBA.
Yeah.
It was just like, and there were two groups I found at Mohawk. There was these folks that came out of university, and then there was folks that had a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And I remember just being a sponge in that company, just learning so much every day. It's what kept us there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it really is. That reason what kept us there. And the only reason that I decided to move on was because it gave me a taste of what more there could be. And I'll tell you, I was at a bit of an advantage when I went to business school because it was a case-based school I went to, and we were sitting in classrooms and debating cases. And the number of times, I'm sure my classmates got sick of it, but I would always be able to draw something from an experience at Mohawk into the discussion at hand, right? Because we worked on construction, we worked on kind of community marketing, we, worked on cash flow issues with our company's operational issues, development and training and customer experience. Like we got to see all of it. And, there was such a rich kind of, base I had to draw from for the rest of my career. And it really did make a difference for me. So thank you. Thank you for your leadership in that time. I really learned a lot.
Oh, that's great. That's nice to hear, Shaquille.
I wanted to kind of close our conversation with kind of one thing. One of the things I recall when I became a district manager and I went on the road the first time, we used to, of course, spend a lot of time on the road. And I remember the first time I came back, you called me in and you said, look, when you come back, don't worry about coming into the office on the Friday. You can work from home. I would have never thought to ask, but you were so proactive in telling me that. And like back in the 90s, that was unusual, right? The idea of working from home was really unusual. It was such an office-based culture everywhere. You recommended that then, and now we're in a situation where everybody's working from home.
Yeah.
A bit ahead of the curve.
Well, I know what it was like to do that job, the district manager's job. But when you're on the road, things pile up, and then, you're better off, and you're away from your friends and family, and you're better off just taking a day to be at home and to get a little bit caught up. And I remember how important that was for me after coming off the road, just to be able to regroup and be able to come back in on Monday much more refreshed and ready to go, for sure. Yeah. And now you got everybody at home.
Yeah, exactly. Now you got everybody at home. And so what do you think is going to happen? Where do you think work life is going to go? Do you think people are going to stay working from home, or do you think they're going to go back to the office when they can?
I think there's some companies that are making decisions right now that they are impressed, I guess, with the level of productivity. Mm-hmm. And I think they're making decisions to keep some of their employees at home. Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know if you're aware of Zillow in Seattle. Zillow is a real estate company. I think they made a decision that all 5,000 of their employees now are going to be working from home for good. But Shaquille, I would caution companies from moving so drastically that way, because I think that, if you're in a transactional job and, you're a sole contributor, you might be able to be more productive at home, right? Yeah. But if you're in a leadership role, right, I think being visible and being part of the hallway conversation and being part of those, Friday last minute meetings, I think it's critical for your development.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's going to be effective for people to have their entire companies at home.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a bit of a hybrid. In all fairness, people don't have to spend time in traffic. They've got more time to, but you don't want your entire company at home, where you're going to end up, in a couple of years, you're going to end up with a completely underdeveloped leadership group. And I stress that because I've seen it. I have not seen a lot of people in significant leadership roles progress their careers working from home.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, we might not have a choice for a while.
Yeah.
And I think people have to make do. But
yeah.
I would just caution companies in making such drastic decisions so fast. I mean, we're only 8 months into this pandemic.
Yeah.
We don't really know what the outcome is going to be. So, yeah.
I think that's really good. That's a really good thinking.
I think what's important right now, you know what I think is important right now, Shaquille, is just giving everyone flexibility.
Yeah.
They've got to do what they have to do to keep harmony within their house and their work. And everybody's situation is different. And I think giving people flexibility is the key.
Yeah, I think that's true. As one of my favorite leadership professors I work with now has come up with this this great analogy for what kind of leadership is required now. Because it's basically being Hercules and Buddha at the same time. And I wanted to kind of close the conversation saying that in my career, I view you as having been both Hercules and Buddha at the same time. And thank you for that. Thank you for that.
No, thank you. That's a good one. I'm gonna keep that one.
Well, I hope we can stay connected. I know you're still doing interesting.
I love it.
And we'll look forward to our next conversation. And thanks for making the time. Wish you all the best.
You're very welcome, Shaquille. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, I feel better after that conversation. Wasn't Cos a great guy? So here's what I took away from Cos. First of all, remember that your people have a choice to make as to whether they come work for you, whether they come to work the next day. As a leader, bring energy. Be responsible for the energy you bring to the relationship because it sets the mood. Sometimes you just have to let people go. When you come to the conclusion that people aren't the right fit, you have to act. The longer you take to act, the more damage you can do. Gave a lesson from Howard Schultz. Face the brutal facts, accept reality, put different issues on the table, and then move on. Constantly be developing yourself. Learning should be an ongoing, everyday exercise, not a once-a-year activity. And finally, he gave a caution and warning to business leaders that are thinking of going completely virtual in their working environment. He thinks it's going to be good in many ways, but that we lose a lot from leadership if we don't have an opportunity to get together physically once this is all over. Thanks for joining me. Hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in the skies. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing, unstationary animation taking